course, I want to thank Ruth for asking me and I guess allowing me to speak today. It's really an honor to be here in our little church. And hopefully you won't feel that you have to run me out on a rail when we're done, or the church won't call for an earlier than normal expected retirement on Ruth's part for allowing me to speak today. So it's really great to be here. It wasn't that long ago Ruth asked me to get prepared to do the sermon, and so I thought about it a lot, so I'm ready today with our material. But she said, no, Bruce. First of all, you only get the 15 to 20 minutes, and secondly, you're only allowed to give one sermon. I said, well, I don't know how I'm going to do that. So I did. This morning, she once again insisted that I keep it down to one sermon, and I do have something here. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Here it is. There it is. There's today's sermon. So thank you. So you don't deny Ruth's guidelines when she's invited you to come and speak. But before I get into our life's journey, which really is kind of interesting, and I will often say I and our. Because of the, whoops. Okay, I just want to confess right up front that I have been most fortunate. We've had a few bumps here and there, but even just finding ourselves here in Cape Porpoise, and myself in Cape Porpoise today, is kind of a good example of how life has brought us opportunities and good fortune here in our little mini megachurch. I love that expression. What happened is back in 1981, Debbie and I got lost on our way to Portland from Massachusetts, which isn't the first time that's happened by people. And we came into Cape Porpoise, and we drove around Pier Road to go look at the water. Well, we're lost, but at least we can look out at the water. And it was a few minutes later, we were so struck on the beautiful day and the siren song of a for sale sign in front of a cottage on Pier Road that we made an offer on the house and was accepted that very day before we went on to Portland. And it was really a remarkable opportunity. Were we lucky? Maybe yes, maybe no. But so far, it's been great. So, coming back to my journey, my early life was really right out of the American Dream playbook. My parents grew up in Depression, Brooklyn, third and first generation immigrant families. They made it through college, and they got reliable employment, and they had their house in the suburbs in Westchester County outside of New York City. It really was remarkable. Our neighborhood in those formative years was also basically another cliche. We were surrounded by woods to play in, lots of young families and friends, and summers consumed by every conceivable game that involved a baseball, a bat, and a glove. And it was great. It was wonderful. My parents were involved in a variety of community groups and church, where they participated in nearly every committee over the 10 years, 15 years that we lived in that city. And for me, not only did I go to Sunday school every Sunday, but I also started my 50-plus years singing in church choirs. No auditions required. It was a big benefit to me. Besides service to the community, clearly the family's foundation was built upon academics. We had to do good because we didn't have any family history to fall back on. And I was somewhat the nerdy son of the two of us. And we lived by the golden rule and the oft-heard directive, God helps those who help themselves. Have you heard that one before? Yeah, it turns out that maxim goes back 2,500 years to Greek times, is not in the Bible at all. That surprised me when I looked it up just the other day. Nevertheless, it clearly was the mantra of our family, and succinctly captured the drive and the expectations of post-war America. There's no question about it. So it was a wonderful time. Life was good. You know, I made it to a great college. I thank the new draft lottery that I didn't have to go to Vietnam like so many of my classmates and friends did. And I found myself at 22 with a wife, a child, a house, and a great job. It really was remarkable. However, marrying at the age of 20 did not prove to be such a good idea, frankly. I very much enjoyed being adopted into my in-laws' family, but that wasn't a very good basis for a marriage. So although everything went fairly smoothly, that marriage did not survive. Looking ahead, though, of course, as things turned out, Debbie and I met and married in the 80s, both for the second time. For about 12 years, we continued the lives that we had known and always done and had learned ourselves as youngsters, church-going, community-serving, suburban parents. I found a lot of satisfaction and some financial reward working in small companies dealing with new technologies and computer software, and it was great fun. And it had great companionship in these small companies, as we witness whenever we get together in small groups. And church and choir continue to be a big part of our lives. This is a life that many of us have lived, and it is wonderful. And with Debbie by my side, of course, and lots of great friends, life's journey was pretty smooth with a few speed bumps, and not too much to talk about today. But the key story of our lives was in 1994, we were smitten by an unexpected opportunity that came to us through an advertisement in the Wall Street Journal. A beach bar for sale with 4 cottages in the British Virgin Islands. Whoa, that was cool. Somehow, we flew down and looked it over and decided to do it. And by August 1995, we were the owners living on site on the beach with this business. No road, no utilities, and rain is our only source of water. Our first 20 days, and I'm not making this up, included 2 hurricanes, the first 2 in 6 years in the Caribbean, in that end of the Caribbean. For scorekeepers, that was Hurricane Luis and Hurricane Marilyn. But we got through all that, and but the bigger story and the most important thing today is we had no experience in the hospitality business whatsoever. It was a huge change. We had not anticipated fully, I'm not sure we could have, the challenge of actually getting things done on an island of 120 residents. Folks of West Indian ancestry, as you might expect, whose experiences, education, and race were so different from our own. As the pale-faced, from-away owners of the second largest business on the island, we were the natural subjects for curiosity, doubts, and skepticism. And their doubts justified by prior experience with people from away. And no argument there. How we behaved in these new surroundings with our new neighbors was going to be tested. It didn't take long for us also to realize how dependent we would be on our fellow residents. You know, wondering where the ferry was when we had guests coming or we had food shipments. Just getting our food shipment when we had to pick it up by dinghy from some dock somewhere on the island. Getting our boat fixed, having enough fuel for the boat, for the generator. Sometimes borrowing scarce food supplies. Romaine lettuce was one of our favorite things to run out of on the island, for example. All these things and passing messages by VHF radio just made us quite aware that we were part of the island if we wanted to get anything done at all. And every day, to say nothing of keeping a few employees, we couldn't succeed without the help of our friends and neighbors, or our to-become friends. If there was ever a time when you wanted others to practice the golden rule, that was the time. We definitely needed that support. So, you know, we had a lot new to us, running the business that we had no idea how to run. We had a lot to learn, and our employees helped us. And we participated in community activities. There are community activities on a small island. Church was a big thing, and we went to the local church. For a year, we went by dinghy because we had no road to the church, and that was an interesting way to get there. Debbie volunteered to be the church choir director, and that was greatly appreciated. They did have a piano that was almost tuned, and of course, I got to be in the choir again. No auditions definitely required there. And I volunteered to be a secretary for a renewed island community group that tried to organize island projects and put together appeals to the government for action that needed to be taken on the island. We treated our staff just like we were back in New England. There weren't too many people working for us that had bachelor's or master's degrees in computer science, kind of people that we were used to. But, some of the same principles seemed to work well. We got into cashing government paychecks, loaning money in large and small amounts to individuals and entrepreneurs with new ideas without expecting any paperwork. We found that didn't work. So we sort of became an island bank for some of our neighbors, and that worked out great. Again, we had the second largest business, and it seemed simple enough. We set up a health insurance plan for our employees, and there were just a whole string of little things that we thought were normal, given our background, that were sort of very much appreciated when we started doing it down there on the island. And in exchange for that, we had some unexpected appreciation and help along the way. So you can see we really have a two-way street going. After about 2 or so years, we were sitting in church one day, and a lay leader, somebody like myself, who came in to fill in for the minister because of the small size of the church, he would go around and pick out some tourists and ask them to introduce where they were from. You can imagine the tourists were easy to pick out in this church. And the minister, the lay person, noticed, well, these people didn't introduce themselves. Now, come on now, tell us where you're from. And one of our neighbors spoke up and said, they're not visitors, they're one of us. We were home. It was sweet. We were home. As you can imagine, not just living on a small island, which I don't recommend if you're not working. It really is a good idea to have something to do every day. For many people, it's just keeping their boat running. But it really is good to have a business, to have something to get up for every day. But it does have its special quirks. Not unusual, things usually didn't go quite right. There was always this excuse and that excuse and oops and ops and oops, something broke, something didn't work, somebody came late, the ferry didn't run. It goes on and on. And there was always a tendency then to get into the blame game. Well, I couldn't get here because of this, and Charlie didn't do that, and Jojo didn't do that, and he was supposed to get the car running. And I just learned that, stop with that stuff. Doing the blame game not only wasted a lot of time, it always left you with sort of deciding who did something wrong. So one thing that I learned is that placing blame and smugly winning an argument, I was right, is not a key for future cooperation with your residents. Better just to pass up that opportunity and get on with what comes next. There'll be plenty of opportunity in the future to sort things out. We learned that you have an unexpected influence on others without even knowing it. One of our island friends asked me one day, he said, what do you think about people getting married who have really different ages? And I gave him a simple response. Seemed like an academic question, maybe something from one of his children who were young adults. And I said, well, love really knows no bounds. If there's true love, they're just, people should go with it and, life will work out one way or the other. And, but it turns out, and he thanks me often for this, it was he who was making that decision. And he thanks me for marrying a German woman, 15 years his junior. So my simple answer really means a lot to him in a way that I'd never expected. And I think we all have opportunities like that. Sometimes you never learn about it, sometimes you do. So I think it's important that we, treat people with care, even with the words that we use. You often experience more directly the implication of your action, where you really get something surprising back, sometimes in surprising ways. Here's a little story. Debbie and I were headed to San Juan from the British Virgin Islands airport on Tortola, an island in the Virgin Islands. I discovered I left my passport back at the house. That's like a 4-hour round trip when you add the cab and the ferry and everything. I did have a copy of my passport, and the American Airlines agent said, "Oh, Bruce, you remember me? I can help you with that." And I said, "No." He had sold us some insurance for medevac services. "Oh, I can get you on there, no problem." He says, "I don't know how you'll get back, but..." So I said, "Hey, one step at a time. We were traveling with friends. I'll get there, we'll get back." When we got to San Juan, the immigration officer, I said, "I don't have my passport, I have this copy." And he looks at me, and he types in my number. "Oh, get out of here." So I figured, well, this can't be that bad. 3 days later, we come back to the airport in San Juan, and the American Airlines agent there, who doesn't know me at all, said, "I can't let you on the plane because we would be breaking rules by letting you go to the British Virgin Islands from San Juan without your passport." Holy cats. So what do we do now? I have my brand new cell phone. I called the government in the BVI, I called for the immigration office at the airport in the BVI and said something like this: "Hi, I'm not sure we've met, but I'm Bruce from Sandcastle Hotel on Joseph Van Dyke, and I've got a little problem because of my passport and this kind of thing." And he says, "Let me speak to the agent." We got on that flight. When we got to the airport, Tortola, the immigration officer saw us online, and he's giving us a big smile. So, "All right, get out of here, you guys." It was really nice that we had a reputation that had built up over the years that allowed that to happen. And it's nice when people, you can just tell that he enjoyed being able to do that for us. That was really a great example. So, time went on. We have lots of stories, and we don't have time to discuss any more. But, for family and getting older reasons, they do catch up. We did sell our business and moved to Cape Porpoise full-time in 2005. Our adventure was 10 years, 3 months, and 5 days. But who's counting? You can imagine that we have a pile of stories another day. So here's, upon reflection today, what is the difference between being in New England, suburbia, where we grew up, and on a Caribbean island? We find ourselves asking, why did things go so well, despite those vast apparent differences? Okay, and you can just imagine. And what I see is that the basic lessons that Debbie and I learned in church, at school, proven to us in so many ways, and confirmed in our beliefs, that a lot of our success was based on basic Christian principles. At the core of all of us is God's grace, even amongst those like my agnostic friends who won't admit maybe that there is God's grace. The simplicity of the golden rule should be a guide to all we do and say. There is today's lesson from Matthew. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. And this is what I see as key. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. That's both plus and minus, both sides. Of course, I'm especially fond of the contemporary corollary, what goes around comes around. And if that's a summary of my pitch today, that is really what I believe. I love that way of saying it. Forgive easily. Don't sweat the small stuff. You'll have plenty of opportunity to need other people's forgiveness. Lean toward generosity. We can't take it with us. And finally, I'd like to say, You know, you've heard that expression, you've seen those signs that come around that say, drive like your children live here. Well, my version of that today is treat everyone as if they are God's children, because they are. Thank you very much.